welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Turn the Page. I'm your host today, Jen, and today I am joined by the author of an absolutely delicious romance. I've had such a great time reading this book. It has opened up a whole new world of romance genre for me, and I am so excited for this opportunity. Welcome. Could I ask you to introduce yourself and your book, please?
Hi, I am Ashley Bennett. I'm a monster and paranormal romance author. My book, Muscles and Monsters, is a cozy monster romance, and it's going to be released February 10th. And I'm very excited to be here today to talk about it.
It's so much fun. And, I usually don't start with self-narration, but just a little background. So I didn't read my first romance until I started co-hosting this podcast back in 2021. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've wasted like 38 years of life. Like, what am I been doing? And so now I get to explore all these subgenres and stuff. And so this is my first paranormal romance, and it is so warm and so cozy. And I really love how you balance the supernatural with that really warm, inviting feeling. Before we get to that, though, I'd love if you could tell us a little bit about your journey as a writer and your other works.
Of course. So back in high school, I was a pretty avid creative writer. I won some awards, just like within my high school and like a few local competitions. I started working as a vet tech out of high school, didn't really do anything with that whole creative writing background for a long time. Like you, around COVID time, I got really into reading romance. And I was just kind of like, oh, maybe, I could try to write a romance. And that's kind of how I got back into writing again. I made some author friends who were very encouraging, and, kind of through that help, I got the confidence and I was like, okay, this might be something that I can sit down and try to do. So, and it just kind of took off from there, I guess.
Nice. In the dedication to this book, you shout out all the readers who loved this book the first time around. I'd love if you could talk a little bit about its origins and that development process. Where has this book gone and where is it going?
Yeah, it's actually I first started this as a self-published novella. I published in the Kindle Unlimited. I kind of thought that that was the best fit for me at the time. Limited writing experience, and it felt very overwhelming to try to think about getting an agent or going the traditional publishing route. So I self-published this book back in 2022, and it was just novella length at the time. It did, fantastic right out of the gate, but I think that that's really because I had good branding. So, I had that to kind of help me along. It, I think, peaked at 126 in the Amazon store, which totally exceeded my expectations for a debut monster romance. I think that at the time, really the biggest monster romance was Morning Glory Milking Farm by C.M. Nascosta. So, I got into this fairly early on. So, my readers who kind of made the book take off, I really appreciate them. And I think that they've played such an important role in how I got here. Their love for the series, I wouldn't be able to do it. I get like emotional sometimes because it's been such a life-changing thing for me. Those readers, I thought it was very important that I kind of give them a shout out because I wouldn't be here without them and that support.
Wow. It's a really cool opportunity for a book to get to find its audience, and then grow a little bit more. And that's a really, the publishing world has changed in so many ways, like for good, for bad, for weird. But I think this is a nice little highlight that, a book can kind of find its audience, like while it is, in its growth process. That's really cool.
I agree. There's been so many changes to the world of publishing, and it's very interesting to see, how people start their career in one place and then it just completely takes them somewhere else. So it's been so fun to kind of experience that for myself.
Mm. So tell us a little bit about Tegan. I immediately fell in love with her as a bi curvy baker. That was just like, yes, you hit all of the points. I immediately identify with her, love her, root for her. Could you talk a little bit about shaping her character and maybe her family relationships? Because there's some interesting stuff going on there too.
Yeah, I think that, Atlas was obviously my first character that I really kind of nailed down his characterization because he was inspired by, an anime character, but that's, another conversation. But Tegan, I kind of wanted to write myself and write some of, I guess, my friend's experiences into a character. She is kind of like at a point in her life where she has to decide between career goals or what she wants in her personal life or relationships. As a bisexual person, that representation was very important to me without making it kind of the main focus of the book or her character. She's bisexual and that's just she is, as well as, that representation of, not our typical straight size female main character. That was representation that I wanted to have in there as well. And then I think, as far as family dynamics go, nobody has a perfect family dynamic that I know of. And, I think that I've had some, some not confrontational, but just issues within my own family, especially sibling relationships, that just over time and as your family changes, that dynamic between the two of you changes. Um, and, Reese's book is the second book in the series. So I thought, kind of setting that up between the two of them would make his book and the resolution of everything that's going on between them, very satisfying to the reader. So that's, kind of where I got her inspiration. Baking wise, I really love the contrast of a baker with, kind of our gym bro, gym owner. Plus, I just really love baked goods too. So it seemed like a good choice. I love her as a character, and I always think like, do I want to be Tegan or do I want to be with Tegan? Like that's kind of my feelings towards her. But she's such a fun character to write, and that, I just love that she's very sure of herself. So, maybe I wish I was a little more like that in myself, but
Yeah, I really enjoy her because she is very career focused, and you have that thing where like you could spend a little bit more time on your personal life perhaps because you are so focused on continuing the family business, and making your name. But she isn't like deeply insecure. She doesn't have like major communication problems. Like she's a confident, sort of secure person. And that's really, really nice to see that her doubt comes from not like her relationship to her body or like a trauma in the past or anything, but from like a place of confidence and like security. I hope that makes sense.
it absolutely makes sense, and that was very intentional on my part. I think that in sometimes when we see certain types of representation, it comes from more of a trauma angle rather than seeing that representation in a very positive way. I didn't want any conflict about her body type or, the way that she feels about herself. And I think that there's, some moments where she maybe has that little bit of self-doubt, but I think that that's very natural for all of us. But, for me, I wanted a nice, confident character that, has her flaws, but is extremely relatable to the reader. So
Absolutely. So let's move on to Atlas. By the way, that's a great name for a guy who owns a gym. Like it's absolutely perfect. And I love him too. He's like literally like a sweet puppy dog character. Like he's just so lovable and so open and vulnerable, in a way that's really refreshing to see for a male love interest. I'd love if you could talk a little bit about him and maybe what your approach to romantic or sexual tension is, like how you make those characters come together and clash a little bit.
Atlas was very easy, like I said, for me to come up with. He's based off of a character from it's a manga and anime series called Beastars. I love the male main character from the show. He's like cute and kind of nerdy, and in my mind, Atlas is this big gym bro, but he's also sensitive, a little nerdy behind the scenes. And I wanted him, I think, to be the one who is a little more insecure in, kind of the things outside of his gym life and business owner life. I wanted that sensitive male main character because I think that there's such a good balance of each other, between Atlas and Tegan. And, I just think that, he's such a good character and I love him. And I think that readers too have really kind of latched onto his character. I think that, as far as for me, developing tension between the two of them, I love a good fated mate story. I love that, especially I love situations where they're trying to fight it at first and then they eventually have that give in moment. I live for that moment. And it's just their meet cute is one of my favorite things too. I think that we've all had that moment where we're absolutely have reached our limit with something and we're on the verge of a breakdown and then somebody comes along and is finally like, hey, let me help shoulder some of this burden for you. And I love that he was able to do that for Tegan. And then kind of on the other side, she was able to provide the things that he sort of needed, recovering from sort of his issues with his body image and his past relationship and how toxic that was for him. And tension, I think for me, comes fairly easy because I really enjoy characterization. I wish that I had more of, a description of how I achieve that. I just think it's, making two characters who are, at least in, the type of writing that I do, just a very good balance of each other. And having those moments where one character truly needs the other and it just kind of works out. And then there's, kind of an insta love aspect, I guess, that I also enjoy writing. Um, that insta lust too, I guess, where you're very attracted to someone from the first time you meet them. So that's also kind of fun to play around with too, especially in their situation. They're both very interested from that first moment. So I think that that helps a little bit with sexual tension.
Yes. Yeah, I absolutely love, I do love a good slow burn, but I loved the insta love or lust dynamic as well because it creates a different kind of tension. Like in a regular slow burn, it's like, oh, we don't know how we feel and we're sort of circling each other and we're going to figure it out. But this is like, no, we know how we feel and we're just going to like fight it until it feels like it's been an appropriate amount of time.
Yes. And like I said, I live for that moment where they're both just like, oh my gosh, finally, like this is happening. So I guess that's what I enjoy about slow burn, even though I don't think that that would work well for my writing style. I think that book two is a little bit more of a slow burn. Um, but for these two characters, it just felt very natural to kind of make it one of those things where they're fated mates, and from the very beginning, they're just so into each other. They're very down bad, and I love that.
Me too. And there's something really interesting, I think, about like when you're crafting tension about like some of it comes from like the mixing of personalities and like, family interests, because Tegan's brother is a little bit intrusive into her business. But then a lot of it also comes from like I hope this makes sense, a character's relationship to their own like vulnerability and willingness to put themselves in a vulnerable place. And I think you see both characters really grapple with this idea of like, I know what I want, but I need to get myself to a place where I can admit it either to myself or to that person?
Yeah, and I definitely think, especially in Atlas's character, it does take him a little more time to kind of give into this, I guess, after, what he's been through. I don't want to give too much away, but after what he's been through, it's kind of, he doesn't want to jump into things too soon. Where I think that Tegan, a little bit is held back with her brother, but not too much. But I think that that's, these are all things that come into play in people's real lives. So I really wanted to kind of put that to the page because, again, I think that it's so important to have situations feel relatable. I think that, we've all had someone where it's maybe you're thinking it's not the right time and then it ends up being the right time and it's a very good fit. I know that for my husband and I, it was very much one of those situations. So maybe I'm kind of writing from experience a little bit too.
Oh, nice. Could you talk a little bit about your approach to world building. Um, because this is, as we have, hinted at, it's a sort of, there are paranormal creatures in this world. And it's a very friendly and open world, like everybody's living together and gets along, which is really nice to see. Especially given the fact that this is the first in a series. Can you talk about like your approach to revealing the town and its other inhabitants and sort of how that plays into your long-term plans?
I really wanted it to be very normalized that monsters have just been a part of this world. That felt like the most natural thing at this point. I didn't want any of that tension between, humans and monsters. I think that, there's just enough going on in the world that I wanted something very cozy and relatable. And then I kind of do have plans moving forward about other areas. Like there's some things mentioned in the series, other towns. I would love to build on this world a little bit more. Briar Glen is such a tiny, little, cute, up and coming town that I'd love to see something with, a bigger city or something like that. But it's been very important to me that it feels natural. Everybody gets along. So
Yeah, I do appreciate that because it seems like a very like stereotypical place for tension to come from would be like, oh, her family disapproves of her dating a wolven or, like what have you. But when you put that aside and you get to focus on more on like character and how two people relate to each other is like an interesting other direction to go in.
yeah, and again, that was, I think that in the first iteration of the book, there was, quite a little bit of that. But for this expansion, I wanted it to be more focused on the positives.
Very nice. I'd love to talk about, to whatever extent you're comfortable revealing your approach to spice. It's very spicy. It's like the spiciest book I've read to date. And I was like, oh, this is so fun. Um, I'd love to know how do you navigate like what you show, what you hint at, what you obscure entirely. There's a lot on the page, but you do, as an author, you're always making choices about like what you show and what you don't show. So how does your approach to writing spice relate to like say, character development or plot advancement?
I think that, the spice has to feel, the natural timing of the relationship, I guess. I knew that, I didn't want to, continue their relationship further without any spicy points, especially for as into the as into each other the characters were. And in the first iteration of the book, it does progress very fast. It's novella length. But for this, I think it was nice that I got to slow the beginning of the relationship down, and then every kind of encounter between them after that, it it had to feel like a natural moment that they as a couple, these were things that they would experiment with, I guess. And I think that both of them too were very aware of, you know, the speed at which things were moving. And I think that with writing spice, what you show and what you don't show, it's kind of one of those things that comes from experience, reading spicy scenes and then, the experience that you develop as you write them. It's obviously there's more spicy scenes now because I did add a few when I did the expansion. But I just really want the spice to fit the pacing or fit the moment. I don't want to seem like I'm just adding spice just to add spicy scenes, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah, it comes at like times that feel like appropriate for the characters and where they are, both like on their individual journeys and their journey together. And it does feel like very plot significant when it does happen. Like it changes things for them and like it creates new opportunities for story and stuff like that. So I just think this book has been so much fun to read and I really enjoyed talking about it with you.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I am so appreciative that you took the time, you're taking the time to read it. And thank you for having me on because I love talking about my books and especially talking about romance in general, and the writing process. It's something I'm very passionate about. I had people that were kind of mentors to me. So any, knowledge that I can share about my writing process, I'm always happy to sit down and talk about that.
Nice. That's how we keep a healthy succession of authors for generations to come. So great.
Yes, sharing the knowledge.
Yeah. And so, you don't have to reveal too much, but what can we expect from this series going forward? Are there any hints at the future you can give?
So like I said, the second book is the brother Reese's story. And I don't want to give too much away because there are people who haven't read the first book, but the cover is obviously a hint of where things are going from here. And then after that, there is a story about another family member that it's, personally probably my favorite book of the series. It's very rare that we get a later in life romance. So that's, something that I really wanted to write. And that kind of representation was very important to me. Just from kind of seeing what my parents' friends have experienced, I drew a lot from the things that I've heard. And I would love to continue this world. Like I said, I would love to write kind of something a little more city focused too. I love the idea of, monsters and humans working in a big city or working in an office building together, or, a barista and a businessman together or something like that. I think that that would be a really fun dynamic. So I'm hoping that, I can continue with this series. I love writing in this world, and there's a lot of options for expansion, I think.
Cool. Well, I can't wait to see where it goes. And thank you again for joining us. This has been lovely.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, listeners, please check out Muscles and Monsters. It is an absolute blast. You'll have a great time. It is available as of the time that you are hearing this. It will have just been published 2 days ago. So please head to your favorite bookstore, library, website, wherever you like to go for books. Do you have a place that you like to send people to for books?
I usually send people to the Penguin Random House website, and they can, purchase from the retailer of their choice. Bookshop.org is also another very popular one if you want to support indie bookstores. For the UK, I think that all I have details for right now is for Amazon. I'm still waiting for that. But if you Google it, if you live outside of North America, you should be able to find it.
Nice. All right, listeners, you have your assignment, so we'll leave you with that. Thank you so much for joining us. It is now time to close this chapter.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.